Welcome into this week's episode of the HighSchoolOT Press Box. The date of recording here is September 21st. We just wrapped up week 5 of the high school football season in North Carolina and the 6th week of the fall sports season. Evan Moesta here alongside HighSchoolOT contributor J. Mike Blake. It's been a crazy weekend, J. Mike, at the high school level, the college level, the professional level. North Carolina high school football has really put its stamp on the last couple of days. Pretty crazy when you think about it. Friday was exciting, had a bunch of crazy games come down to the very end. Obviously, the game that we had at the game of the week with Mallard Creek and Cardinal Gibbons, that one was pretty wild, and how that came down to the end. A Mallard Creek alum, though, I think kind of stole the show on Sunday in the NFL, that being the Philadelphia Eagles' Jordan Davis. He had what I would argue is probably one of the better performances from a defensive tackle all year in the NFL. Was a part of 2 blocked kicks. He had the solo block on the game-winning kick and then decided to house it for fun. What a weekend for him. But he was one of a handful of North Carolina high school football alumni who made their mark on the NFL this week in week 3 of the NFL schedule. Also, shout out AC Reynolds, their former quarterback, Ben Johnson, now the head coach. He picks up his first win. So a big one for Ben Johnson. Charlotte Latin's Daniel Jones, he's kind of taken over there in Indy for the Colts. Now 3-0. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming after, what had happened at the end of his Giants tenure, and he signs on with the Colts there, and he's caught fire so far at 3-0. Amarion Hampton, the rookie for the Chargers, he picked up 120 yards and a touchdown today. That is a Cleveland High School and a UNC alum there. And then Northern Guilford's Keenan Allen had a game-tying touchdown for the Chargers as well. Just a huge day of college football, but also, NFL football, but also college on Saturday. If we're starting to string together a couple weeks where there's some kids from North Carolina making some really big noise, Watauga alone has had some guys kind of really put their stamp on the last 2 Saturdays in college football.
Yeah, last week it was Isaiah Shirley, who, by the way, played a lot of tight end at Watauga. So him catching that interception, a big guy, a thick 6, as we call it. To me,
Jared.
Did that, like Jamal Jarrett did that too. Now, Jaw Jarrett did not play any tight end in high school. That was a little bit more surprising. But him moving for that size did not surprise me. But then, this week, a Watauga guy hurt NC State. It was Duke's Anderson Castle, who started his college career at Appalachia State, and I saw him play an option quarterback for the Pioneers a few years back. There was question like, would he play free safety in college? He's really settled in at running back. 3 touchdowns on the day for Duke. On the other side, NC State, their best player was Grimsley wideout Terrell Anderson. You look around, I was just kind of like, scrolling the timeline, flipping through channels, and it seemed like every couple minutes it was like, hey, I remember that guy, or I know where he went to high school. It was like Brian Rowe of South Carolina getting his first varsity touchdown. Now, the announcer did say he was from Concord, North Carolina, not Concord, as it's supposed to, but, teaches on. I guess he was thinking of the northern.
Robinson.
Think of the northern, the city of Concord, not Concord like we have it down here. Palmer Williams, punter from Baylor. He went to Davie County. He had an incredible high school career. So no surprise when he had a good one there. And then in FCS level, this is not a complete list. I'm sure I missed several, but I'm just giving you an idea of how powerful it's been, or how much impact the North Carolina guys have been making. Randall King, who sophomore from Northern Nash, grade 2 sport athlete. He had 4 touchdown receptions in an overtime game that left the Camels over Bryant, which is just, he was making plays all over the field. So again, just 4 receiving touchdowns in the game. And it's something we've talked about on the show previously, Evan, where it's like the talent in this state, like people have to respect it. And it's not just getting it done in the out-of-state competitions like we're seeing this year. It's getting it done when our best guys go to the next level and beyond. They're still getting it done. This is a really good football state. We love our basketball. I still think baseball is the most talent-rich sport that we have. But football, man, you can't complain.
Yeah, it's been a really good weekend so far for across all levels, high school, college, and in the pros. But, I'll say if we want to talk about a lot of guys who are kind of in that next wave of players from North Carolina who are going to make an impact on Saturdays and then eventually Sundays, a lot of it, especially in the Triangle area of North Carolina, resides at Millbrook and Rolesville High School. We've documented a lot of that in the preseason. They're going to face each other this Friday. Arguably the biggest game in the state. A very exciting matchup, a matchup that I don't think any of us have a clue how it's going to go, and I think that's what makes it great. It's going to be an exciting one over at Rolesville on Friday night. Let's start the conversation, though, about what makes that matchup so intriguing, because I think going into the preseason, you looked around and you said, well, you just couldn't shake off. Yeah, Millbrook had new pieces and all of this. You couldn't shake off the result of last year. And you were at that game last year. Rolesville wins 35-0. Obviously a different Millbrook team and a different Rolesville team there, but it was just like, that was such a stark result in a game that I feel like we thought was going to be a close game last year, that it was just hard to shake that off. But now that we are a couple weeks into the season, we've been able to figure out, like, okay, from what we think this one's going to be a close one. Just looking at personnel, looking at performance, looking at play styles. We'll start with you, J. Mike. You know, you've seen Rolesville, and I'll say you didn't see Rolesville at their best. You know, since we last saw Rolesville and discussed Rolesville, they have not lost. A really impressive win against Richmond a few weeks back, and then a big win over Corinth Holders off of their bye week, and so they come in with a win. What's it going to take from the Rams to be able to they have a nice little win streak going over Millbrook right now in football. What's it going to take for them to continue that?
Well, it's interesting. You know, last year, actually, I kind of did expect last year's game to go that way because I didn't think Millbrook had enough on offense to kind of combat what Rolesville was going to bring on defense. Just a lot of quarterback pressures, quick throws, and I didn't think Millbrook had the guys to take the top off of that defense. This year, though, I think Millbrook is a little bit more dynamic. They haven't necessarily had to show it in the first 4 games of the year, but I liked a lot of the different little things, little flashes that we saw at the high school T Jamboree at Wake Forest. So that's the starter, is just, you know, getting Rolesville's defense to be on the field for extended periods of time. It was something that did not happen last year's game that I think Millbrook can do a better job of this year. You know, when I was on the postgame show after Rolesville lost to Providence Day, and we were talking about Rolesville being 0-2 and what it would take for them to kind of turn the corner, because they did have a tough schedule, right? They were going down to Richmond, and it was the kind of thought was like, well, what if they're 1-3 stumbling into this game? Well, they're not. They're 2-2. I said one thing, they have to be a little bit more ball hawks on defense. They had not forced any turnovers on Providence Day in that showdown of week 2. I can't remember how many turnovers they had against Mallard Creek in week 1. They had 2 last week against Corinth Holders, or 2 interceptions last week against Corinth Holders. That's what you got to see in this game, because I think as cliche as it sounds, the turnover battle would be huge, because both teams would really appreciate a short field against the other's defense, right? And Rolesville last year, it wasn't like their offense went crazy on Millbrook. It was those short fields set up from turnovers. So,
remember, Riley Daniels had a heck of a game just on kickoffs.
Yeah.
Did he recover 2 onside?
To recover 2 onside kicks. Yeah, that's right. And
with Braden Atkinson, that was all Rolesville really needed, because this is nothing against this year's Rolesville team, but I don't think we ever didn't give Braden Atkinson the flowers that he deserved. But now that you can step back and just look at what everything looks like now that he's gone and what he's accomplished, he was so good. Mm-hmm. Like, Braden Atkinson was so good. And I think in the heat of the moment, like, you didn't realize how good he was. Obviously a top 5 quarterback in the state just last year alone, but
incredible deep ball accuracy.
Exactly.
You have to respect every route that was out there. That's something Millbrook can try to take away a little bit.
Some short field to work with. So I think that's a big thing. And then obviously, like, the maturation of Millbrook's defense is something that I didn't think we maybe thought through as much last year, because yeah, on paper, like Millbrook has this great defense a year ago, but they're all sophomores, and you throw them into that big game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not that they weren't good enough to be in that moment. It's just we're talking high school football at the highest level, and so now that they have that experience, they have that full year and a half under their belt since all of that has happened. They're older, they're juniors now. Like, there's a lot to be said from that, because when it comes to high school sports, you see probably the biggest jump in improvement in athletes from sophomore year to junior year. And so the fact that that entire core is mostly juniors, I think you can see a lot of the same names as last year, but completely different results from that defense.
Yeah, I think so as well. Like last year, just kind of looking up the box score, AJ Roberts, 4 receptions, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. He finally got a few deep balls. He hadn't in the first 2 games. He did against Richmond. That was been huge for Rolesville and trying to get their explosiveness back, because I mean Gavin Waddell can run every kind of route. He could be a safety valve, but you need that guy, putting pressure. And I think last year Millbrook was a little bit, like I said, they're young, and in the moment they're like, oh man, onside kick, we have to go out here on defense again. And then Braden Atkinson would go for the kill shot, and he was 20 of 25 passing for 304 yards. Rolesville, a little bit offense looks a little bit different this year, and I think that plays into Millbrook's hands. That Millbrook can defend these Rams a little bit better than last year's. So I think it would be a much different story. Remember that now 35-0. That would be a running clock in this year.
Yeah,
I don't think we get close to that at all. Like I know it's like the most obvious of predictions, but
yeah.
I think it's gonna be worth everyone's time. Whereas last year, like really, this was a top 10 matchup. Like people left there going, "Well, what did I just watch? That was supposed to be number 6 versus number 10." This year, you're going to have no doubts. Like these two teams are properly ranked in the top 25.
Yeah, and I think if you're Rolesville, I think that Richmond result is what you can hope for on Friday night. Caleb Williams over 200 yards. You have AJ Roberts and Gavin Waddell over 80 yards receiving. Amir Brown over 100 yards rushing, 3 scores. I mean, that's what you're hoping for. That's the blueprint. If you're Rolesville, what you did against Richmond was the blueprint. Second half, Richmond could not keep their offense out of the end zone. The last 3 quarters of that game were really big for the Rams. And, Caleb Williams continuing to get more and more comfortable with that offense. Obviously, I mean, Gavin Waddell is an incredible wide receiver. He's Louisville bound. AJ Roberts, probably one of the better wide receiver 2s in the entire state. Would probably be the top guy at most high schools in North Carolina. But I also think I mentioned Amir Brown, 115 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns against Richmond. In it wasn't a must-win game, but like in terms of being able to shake off the first 2 weeks, like Rolesville needed that Richmond game so bad. Not looking into the Corinth result too much, but obviously that was a blowout victory for Rolesville. But for Amir Brown, this has to be like the game that you break out, and this has to be like your big moment. I feel like the one where you kind of have your best stamp on Rolesville's football program and show why you're this UNC bound running back. He's facing a really good defensive front over at Millbrook, and if he can have a 100-yard rushing game and a couple of scores, that's going to be huge for Rolesville, because in that Providence Day game, I felt like he may have left a little bit on the table there. And, he had a couple plays that he could have probably broken off in that game where it would have turned things around. And then all of a sudden that game doesn't get as lopsided as it does early. And then on the Millbrook side, like you said, their offense last year kind of sputtered out against Rolesville's defense. But I feel like this year, a reason they probably have a lot of confidence going into Friday night is because they have a lot more weapons there. I think the running back battle is going to be incredible to watch between Brown on Rolesville's side and then Brylas and McCullers on Millbrook's side. If we're talking about blueprint here, Millbrook's best win to this point is that Garner win in week 1, which sitting here now entering week 6 of the football season looks a lot better than it did maybe a couple of weeks ago. Garner beating Southeast Raleigh, Garner blowing out Middle Creek. Like Garner really, really righted the ship after that 34-13 game against Millbrook to open the year. That's a great win for Millbrook the more and more you look at it. But even that game, like Brylas and McCullers, 23 carries for him. He had 3 touchdowns in it, 85 yards rushing. If McCullers or Brown can get 15 to 20, 25 carries, 100 yards, and multiple scores, I think their team's feeling pretty good. And I think also with Millbrook, like you have Malachi Thomas now who came over from Cleveland. I think that changes their entire passing game. He's been phenomenal for them on the outside. And I think it's allowed, some of their other players like, to slot into different positions like Malachi Gilchrist. We saw him play really well at the HighSchoolOT Jamboree, like putting him over in the slot, giving a lot of size on the outside that Bryson Gray can throw to, I think really helps Millbrook as well. It's going to be interesting. It's a completely different game from last year. There's a ton of talent on the field, though, on both sides of the ball for both teams, and I think that's really cool. It's going to be interesting. If I was to ask Joel Bryant, I think he would say maybe leaning a little bit in the direction of Millbrook, but it's a toss-up. But this is a prove-it game for Millbrook. You're this top 10 team that has these state championship aspirations. I feel like this is not the only matchup that these two teams are going to have this season. But it's weird. Joel and I kind of talked about this in the summer. It almost feels like the team that loses this game might be the one who wins it in the postseason.
Right, because I think a lot of us are kind of banking on seeing these two teams again in the postseason. Because in 8A, the bracket is so small. And the size of
unless Hogger gets one of them earlier.
Hogger, Jordan, and then these two
are going to go west.
Yeah, that's true. So, you don't know whether you can count on Jordan being there or not. So, it's a little bit easier to kind of predict a postseason rematch, if you will. And that's happened a few times, and Rolesville's been used to playing teams 2 times around. They played Gibbons. And the last year they beat Gibbons 2 times. The year before they had won in the regular season, lost in the postseason. So they're ready to see somebody 2 times in 1 year. So they're quite used to that actually.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we're going to learn a whole lot from Friday about what 8A is going to look like based off the result of this game. And this is a big stretch for Millbrook as well. They have this is a gauntlet. You got Rolesville on Friday, and then you got to turn around and you have to host Leesville the next Friday. That is the conference right there. Yeah. If your goal is to win this league, then you got to go 2-0 the next 2 weeks. No bones about it, because I saw Leesville on Friday against Wakefield, and that's a really good team. Like they are really talented. They have a lot of size and they have a lot of skill there. But again, that's one that we're tracking. There's a lot of kind of dialogue and debate over this game on Friday and what could happen. But I think it'll be an intriguing one. I think in the end, though, it really comes down to what team is a little bit more experienced and mature and can execute at the right times. Let's change things up here, though, in the HighSchoolOT Press Box. Evan Moesta, J. Mike Blake here. Let's head down to the 704 area code and let's switch gears towards soccer. J. Mike, you saw an incredible match last week at Huff. Number 1 ranked at the time, Myers Park, going on the road, falling down early, coming all the way back, taking the lead. Huff leveling the match in the final minutes, and then winning it in overtime. But it brought up an interesting conversation between the two of us earlier this week. When conference realignment happened, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, and we've talked about this in previous episodes of the show, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools was very strategic in how it built together its new conferences and how it put a heavy emphasis, I would say, on schools being paired with other schools that athletically are like-minded. And it kind of took travel out of the equation, where a Huff would much rather travel to a Myers Park to play soccer than it would want to travel to a Harding or a West Charlotte to play soccer, for instance. So they kind of took any old conference rivalries out the window and just put the best against the best. Obviously, in the MEC Power Six for football and basketball, like that's going to be just this epic league. But what did you see, and what is your takeaway? Because it sounds like every time we talk about soccer in the state this fall, everything circles back to what's happening in the 704 area code.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of place my finger on it. I think it's a mixture of the academy scene down there, as well as just a natural. These had a lot of good teams last year that did not graduate as many key pieces as some of the best teams in the triangle, right? Because usually the old 4A is always triangle best versus Charlotte best, with a few, I guess, like a few, over the years, a few exceptions with like Hoggard or Laney. I think it was interesting. Huffin and Myers Park. So just for if folks out there don't know, like those are 20 miles apart, which is a good 45 minutes of driving through Charlotte roads. And in Wake County, you would have people who would just like freak out if they had to go 45 minutes for a conference game, right? Or say, hey, we need to change this. Why are we in a league with them? In Wake County, you have rivalries that people hold on to, where Charlotte's kind of blown this thing up. Hopewell and North Meck are both in Huntersville. They're in different leagues. Independence and Rocky River are both in Mint Hill. They're the only two high schools in Mint Hill. They're going different ways. I think it's going to be smarter for them, and I think we're going to see that in the RPI as those projections roll out. But the other thing that I think has helped 704 is they have had MLS Next just a little bit earlier than the Triangle it has. And because of that, yes, guys who make MLS Next don't play high school soccer. But I think it gives you this one thing people are shooting for. And then the guys who don't make it the next year, or maybe MLS Next says, hey, like, we're cutting you, which does happen. Those guys go back into their high schools and make the high school team even better. So there's like a number of those coaches have said, yes, I have a returning group, but we got in 2 or 3 guys from MLS Next, and we're fitting them all together, which I think is interesting. You haven't seen that in the Triangle as much, but maybe we get to that point where every year in the Triangle, it's like, well, who's coming? Yes, who's going into MLS Next who played high school last year? But it could also be what we've seen in Charlotte is, who are you picking up from MLS Next? And I think in the past, the 704 kind of gets snake bit into some of those championship games. Right? There's a few exceptions, like South Mecklenburg's Cinderella run, for instance. But I think now you're looking at it like, man, they probably have the 8A and 7A favorite, and have from day one. Like, it's been Myers Park and Marvin Ridge, and even with Myers Park losing, they're still probably your 8A favorite. It took Huff a really Herculean effort to force overtime and win in overtime at home. The return match is going to be great. And oh yeah, by the way, like you still have Charlotte Catholic in 6A. So I think a lot of those factors together are really kind of making them primed to be the soccer like hotbed this year, where the East could be the underdog in 8A, 7A, 6A, probably also in 2A, depending on what charter school comes out of the 2A West, and probably also the underdog in 3A. Like it's really interesting how that's just kind of flipped really heavily.
A year ago, there was so much in the East that we saw with, you had Wakefield winning a title, you had Clinton winning a title, you had Western Alamance winning a title last year. So that kind of flips the script there. But yeah, it is looking like right now that 704 area really kind of has separated itself a little bit from the rest of the soccer scene in North Carolina.
Yeah. And I think last year we were also looking at it like, hey, whoever, if it's Wakefield, if it's Green Hope, if it's Holly Springs, like the East will be good in 4A. Like whoever gets there will have a chance for sure. Those were all 3 teams that could have beat each other. Throw Broughton into that mix as well. And then this year, the East, you're kind of waiting for them to for one team to emerge. Middle Creek is up there for 6A for sure. But everyone else, like you have some teams that still have a handful of wins. And now that they're in conference play, somebody's got to step up to the front, whether it's Broughton, Apex Friendship, Green Level, and enter the playoffs with that record we're accustomed to seeing from a top team out of the 8A East. Otherwise, in 8A and 7A, it might be might be a year where the triangle takes a step back and we see a New Hanover in 7A or a Hoggard or a Laney in 8A out of the Wilmington area, because they have lost, I would say collectively, the 919, they've lost a lot of those, not almost all of these non-conference battles that they've had against the best from Charlotte, the best from Wilmington, the best out of the triad. They've lost a lot of them, which is why you're not seeing them, too many of them ranked right now in the statewide rankings, because as a region, you've fallen behind what Charlotte's doing.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we're going to get a lot of answers this week just in terms of where people stand. New Hanover and Hoggard play each other this week. Marvin Ridge and Myers Park, well, while it does not have the consequences of determining the 7 or 8A race, they do play each other as well. So there's going to be some interesting matchups this week that help continue to carve out what soccer is going to look like this postseason. I also think it's interesting. I think we're hitting a threshold here, J. Mike, at the end of September where we're starting to find out across multiple sports who the real contenders are and who's starting to stake their claim as teams that we can start looking at and saying, yeah, they can win a state title. We've gone away from I don't say projecting as like our high school OT playoff projections, but like just thinking like, oh, well, based on what they have back and what they could. No, we're here now, and we can say like, oh yeah, these teams are volleyball, soccer, football state championship contenders.
Yeah, I think for soccer, I'm still hoping to see a few more big clashes. Soccer season ends later than like volleyball, for instance, but I'm still hoping to see a few major showdowns before I can kind of piece together from every class. But I think where volleyball season is, you can speak more to this. We kind of know, and especially after some of the volleyball teams that you saw this weekend, and out in the 828, that was a region that was a little bit of a question mark. I'm sure you're probably feeling pretty good that you can tell us right now, 8A through 1A, what our matchups could probably look like. And if you're not exactly right, you're not going to be too far wrong, I'm sure.
So I put out a thread on Twitter at the beginning of the volleyball season, and I said, okay, I'm going to use last year's East-West lines, and this is what I think the regional contenders are in every region of the state. It's holding pretty good. I was wrong in a couple places. Actually, I can't even say I was wrong because who knows when a team's going to catch fire and do stuff. For instance, this past weekend, West Henderson's inaugural Falcon Bash volleyball tournament, a fantastic event put on by Coach Lawrence and everybody over at West Henderson. It's a shame that this was year one. They tried to do it last year, and I had my entire schedule carved out, but happened to be the same weekend as Hurricane Helene. So they moved it to this year. And it was great. The gold bracket of tournament play at the end of Saturday, the 4 teams that qualified for it, 3 of them were in our preseason top 25, and the only one that wasn't was Ashe County. And I went back and looked at my kind of the math I was doing on my preseason rankings, and Ashe County was right on the outside looking in. So all of those teams kind of were what I thought they were going to be entering the season. So, but I've learned a lot. Hickory, who has been my favorite to represent the 5A West, I still feel very strongly about them. They end up winning the event. So good on the Red Tornadoes there. They battled. I mean, you play 6 matches in 24 hours, and they're 3-set matches, but still they went 3 sets in 5 of the 6 matches. And in those 5, they won 4 of them. So, I mean, that was just the ultimate kind of like test of endurance to make it through that week. They did suffer their second loss of the year. It was to Cherokee at the end of pool play. Cherokee, another team, though, that has spent its entire fall trying to punch above its class as a 2A program. And, they don't have the most depth of any volleyball team in the state of North Carolina. So they only have, I think they were only running with 7 or 8 girls over the weekend. And that makes it tough when you're playing 6 matches and you don't have an entire bench to dive into. And on top of it, you're a 2A school. And they held their own, and they played really well. They ended up beating West Henderson twice, I think, once or twice in that one. I know they got West Henderson in the silver bracket. Yeah, they beat them twice, 2-0 and 2-1. So a good showing there from Cherokee. I still have them as one of my 2A favorites. 2A is going to be interesting, though, because you have Cherokee in there. You have Cornerstone Charter in there. Cornerstone got off to a really hot start, but they, too, have kind of tried to punch above their class and, have taken a couple losses there. Community School of Davidson is a team that is really emerging as a legitimate contender. CSD, I'm excited to see them over this upcoming weekend. Kings Mountain has their Mountaineer Invitational coming up over the weekend. Another fantastic event that brings a lot of the top teams from around North Carolina in. I know Mountain Island Charter's there, South Point, McMichael, Aiden Grifton, Hickory is going to be there again, CSD, Polk County, and obviously Kings Mountain. So a lot of big-time names heading down to Cleveland County over the weekend. But, yeah, I think everything's starting to round into shape. I think off of some of the teams I've projected that I thought at the beginning of the season would be state title contenders, I still like my pick in 8A, Green Level and West Forsyth. The biggest thing is, does Green Level stay in the East? We've talked about that, at length. But Green Level swept away Green Hope this past week, and I don't think they're going to lose. There's just nothing. They've done nothing to prove to me that they're going to lose this year. West Forsyth, they had a really impressive 5-set win over Reagan. That's big for them. That's 2 straight years now that they've beat Reagan, and they have the Raiders one more time. That was a thrilling 3-2, and they've separated themselves from the rest of the traditional 8A West. I think if you're West Forsyth, you're just rooting that you don't get Green Level over there. But West Forsyth has really separated itself. In 7A, it just looks to be Cardinal Gibbons and Marvin Ridge again. I will pay anything and do anything to watch them play each other again. So I hope they continue to kind of roll at the rate that they're rolling right now. 6A is an interesting one, though. There's a lot of teams in 6A that can kind of shake things up and make things interesting. JH Rose, they continue to bend, and they have not broken often this year. They've played so many 5-set matches, and they've come away with so many 5-set wins, which is really impressive there. And it speaks to the experience and kind of that championship pedigree that they have. It's really hard to win in 5 and do it consistently night after night. And it proves that that's a team that returned everybody. And I think I posted this on Twitter on Saturday, and I was watching North Iredell play in the gold bracket over at West Henderson. How many years is it, J. Mike, that North Iredell and Kings Mountain have been the quote unquote 3A favorites in volleyball?
Like all the last 4 years. Yeah, for sure.
Well, they just both move up to 6A and continue this. Like, nothing changed. It's just going to be them in 6A. I think Kings Mountain has the edge over North Iredell. North Iredell doesn't look like some of the teams of the past that may have won a state title a couple years ago. They don't have that big size in the middle. They don't have a ton of size on the outside, but my goodness, do they not have a bunch of girls who are just so defensively savvy and just keep the ball off the floor. It is so hard to just get a ball down on them. They play so well, and that's shouted, that's Dave Markland and great coaching and all of that. And, just so many, all those girls are just so connected in terms of how they play. But it's going to be them in Kings Mountain again. I mean, there's no reason not to believe that that's not the case. 5A's, though, is the one where the 5A East is the one that I think is going to be interesting, and that's because Cedar Ridge has really staked its claim in 5A. And I think that's an interesting one because you looked around and you saw Seaforth, who a year ago, played for the 2A title, came very close to winning the 2A title, and returned all but its setter. But now you're sitting here and you're looking at Seaforth and Kira Rosenmarkle, who was one of their top, outside hitters last year, is now at Union Pines, leading them to a very good record. You have Allie Forbes, who unfortunately we saw get injured in the high school OT volleyball showcase, and that's held her out for a substantial amount of time. I'm hoping that Seaforth is able to get her back and have her at the top of her game. And, they had a kind of a coaching tandem last year, and Helen May, who made a great impact on that program, is now at Cedar Ridge. And she has a program where, that conference is so strong. It has so many former state title appearances across the 7 programs in that conference. Well, Cedar Ridge is unbeaten, and they're rolling. They defeated Seaforth in 4 sets this year. They got Seaforth again this week. They have Grimsley coming up, who they beat in 5. Danny Solomon, who's a 6'2" freshman outside hitter, is incredible. Claire Hargett, who's really, really good and has been for the last couple of years. She's kind of the glue that's keeping them all together. This Cedar Ridge team that's unbeaten right now reminds me a lot of the 2023 Orange team that went on and played for a state title a few years back. So I think they're now in that mix. They're now my favorite. I think Cedar Ridge is now my 5A East favorite. And I'm gonna hold strong on Hickory. 4A West has become very interesting. I think the 4A West, regardless of who comes out of it, will win that classification. Lake Norman Charter, they end up splitting with Community School of Davidson. That one went 5 sets the first time they played, and then Lake Norman Charter got Community School of Davidson last week. So that's a big win for them. Lake Norman Charter is really talented as well. They have a lot of skill at a lot of different positions, and so I think they're in the mix. Their libero, I believe, is going to Missouri. They're a really good team. Ashe County as well. Ashe played for the title on Saturday over at West Henderson, and they have so much energy and they're so scrappy. And this era of Ashe County volleyball, which I would say was the last, 3-4 years, has taken this program to another level. The Overcash sisters, now it's just Lorelei now in her senior year, but I think they've really spearheaded that. Coach Dalton Lewis and kind of the energy he brings has been so infectious for that program that they're always going to compete no matter who's on the other side of the floor. And we saw that over the weekend over at West Henderson. They weren't the biggest team. They didn't have the most depth. They weren't the most skilled team, but they just outplayed so many people in so many matches. I think they're very much in that 4A conversation. Brevard, a team that they swept twice. The Brevard was my favorite coming out of the 4A West. They still have some questions in terms of kind of the maturation of, they had a really, really good JV program that they've moved up, and still getting them acclimated in a very tough league with Franklin and West Henderson. Getting those girls kind of ready to make a run is something that they're going to have to look to do, but they're still in that mix as well, I think. Then moving over to 3A, I mentioned Aiden Grifton. They're going down to Kings Mountain. They're arguably the what did we say, J. Mike, about Wilson Prep football? What, they were the best 0-3 team or 1-3 team?
Yeah.
Well, Aiden Grifton's the best 5-loss team in the state.
Yeah.
I can say that comfortably. Those losses are Chapel Hill in 5, Grimsley in a 3-set match, 2-1, Cleveland, Rose, Seaforth. I mean, they're talk about punching above your weight class. And they've been competitive in all of those matches. They got Rose as well in a return match. So I think Aiden Grifton's your 3A favorite. I'm very confident in that. The biggest thing to see out of Aiden Grifton is just, can they develop that killer instinct? Because if late in a set they can put people away, I don't think they have 5 losses. I think they might have 1 or 2. I think their record drastically changes if they're just able. I think if you were to give them 5 sets back from this season at different points of the year and say, hey, instead of losing this set, you win it. And if they got to pick 5 different sets, I think they could be an undefeated team, a top 5-10 team in the state of North Carolina, if they were to just get a couple points late in a set back. So they've been really competitive there. I touched on 2A, Cherokee, Cornerstone, Community School of Davidson. I really like what's happening out in the East. I think we talked about it in an episode or 2 ago about what's happening in Northeast North Carolina, and it's Holmes that has begun to start to stake its claim up in that region of the state. Holmes defeating Perquimans in 5 sets on Saturday. That was a thrilling one. I had Holmes just above Perquimans in our rankings. Holmes is our 25th team in the state entering this past week. And then Holmes was 1 spot ahead of Perquimans, I think, as the 4th team in the 252 area code rankings. And Perquimans was 5th. So I think that checks out there. That was a close one. This is another one of those matchups where they're going to have to face each other more and more throughout the year. One more conference game. And then I think whoever comes out of that league is the team in the postseason, is the team that represents the 2A East in the state championship. And then 1A, it's Falls Lake Academy. I mean, there's nobody else that I think. Look, Falls Lake Academy swept Chapel Hill.
Right.
I mean,
that's all you need to know.
Like, there's not another. I can't tell you who's going to come out of the 1A West. It's a mix and a mess, and it's gonna be Falls Lake in 3 sets in the state championship. They're just on and they play Green Hope on Monday evening, so it's like if you got a team who's competing at that level,
Yeah,
it's pretty easy to crown them as potential state champions. But it's kind of what I think about the 8 classifications. It's a lot. It's so hard to talk about 8 compared to 4.
yeah, truly.
It makes it long-winded, but also it opens the door for so many more programs. I mean, we're talking about 25, 26 different teams that are legitimately in a position to win a state championship. So that is very
cool for me. I mean, it's not like teams got worse. We just have more championships. And it's just, you're kind of looking for, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm not second guessing myself as much if I see a team that's good, because I know that their bracket is cut in half from what it would be last year, and that I kind of trust that they'll be good at the end of the year too. But it is cool to have, Hickory has a realistic chance at 5A, and so does Cedar Ridge, instead of being in the mix with JH Rose. It opens up a lot of doors for teams who have some of the best teams that they're going to have in school history can potentially play for a ring, or in the past, that may have been one of your best teams ever. They might lose in the 3rd round, though, because the bracket's so big and so loaded. You're not going to have that as much now.
I talked about that earlier in the year. I think when we did our volleyball preview show, and we talked about Grays Creek. Like, that's the perfect, Joel Bryant talks about it in football. Watauga football is one of those programs that just could not punch at the 4A level.
Yeah.
And now they've kind of settled into a spot where they're an odds-on favorite to win a state title. But Grays Creek's in that mix as well, where they couldn't compete as a 4A volleyball program going up against Triangle area teams. Right. As good as they were, they couldn't hang with the Green Levels and the Green Hopes. Now they can kind of hold their own in 6A. Obviously, Rose is in there. There's a couple teams in that mix, but they're in the conversation now as being a 4th, 5th round team opposed to a 2nd round team.
Yeah, I think that's it's such for the guys who have run programs for years, like Grace Creek coach, the Watauga football coach, and Ryan Hobbick. Let me actually pretend like I know a name here or there. I'm just saying, the people who have run these programs for decades, you don't have to have the stars aligned completely to go through 3 upsets against bigger schools anymore. And I think that's cute. I think it's great. I think it's great. Yeah. You build a program, you should be rewarded for building a winner, instead of just saying a little tap on the head, good job. But, did you really think you're going to beat 3 straight opponents with 2,000 or, kids or more?
You can do it once or twice, but you just can't do it for an entire bracket.
Yeah, upsets happen, but can you bring home, hey, we made it to the regional final, we made it to the state championship? Probably not. And that's what this has done. And I look at it on the soccer side, these are all the teams that were making it deep last year, like Marvin Ridge, Myers Park, 8A, 7A,
Charlotte Catholic,
6A. Those teams were all the teams who were top 10 at the end of last year. They're just broken up now where they can all potentially win championships. Western Alamance, Southwestern Randolph, Clinton, you name it. It has not diluted it as much as people thought. And you know what? You said 1A West volleyball, super unpredictable. 1A soccer is really unpredictable, but it's going to be cool because somebody's bringing home the first state championship probably ever, because there's not a whole lot of track record of those small schools winning. So I'm more bullish on 8 classes. I get a lot of people that still want to go back to 6.
Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of the High School OT Press Box. Evan Moesta and J. Mike Blake here as we head into the 6th week of the high school football season and the 7th week of the athletic year in North Carolina. We'll see you next Sunday.